everyone. This is Shane. Thank you for joining us on another Solve Network call. Tonight's guest expert is James Ferguson, who is a coach, mentor, and attorney. And he's going to be discussing integrative experiencing, which is how to transform your life's challenges into championship moments. And I'm really excited to hear about not only more information of what that is, but James's take. So without any further ado, welcome to the call, and thank you, James, for being here tonight.
Hey, Shane, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here on the Solve Network. It's been on my list of things to do for a while, so I'm glad to finally be here.
Well, welcome, and I would encourage you to go into your presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards, and I'm sure that there'll be some interesting things to talk about once you're finished.
Hey, Shane, it is great to be here, and thank you everyone for joining us on this call. My name is James Ferguson. I'm a lawyer, a psychological fitness specialist, and a wellness warrior. And what I want to share with you this evening is what I have dubbed integrative experiencing. And the message is how to transform your life's challenges into championship moments. So a little bit about me and where we're headed. We're on a path to wholeness. So the challenges of our modern experience are ones that are significant for many people, especially in this time this year, considering what's going on in the world as far as we're in an election year and we are in this kind of global reset related to the virus. So this path to wholeness addresses the challenges of our modern experience. I'll explain to you what integrative experiencing is, and we're going to go down this path with 7 steps to nervous system harmony. So I mentioned I'm a lawyer. I've been working as a trial attorney for 12 years, representing clients through some of the most difficult moments of their lives. And now I also am a trained psychological fitness specialist, and I help people transform some of their most difficult moments into their greatest breakthroughs. And thirdly, I'm a wellness warrior. My own burnout is what led me to this work. And in experiencing that, I vowed to support others in healing themselves. And so that is what brings me in front of you today. So I live in Alaska, and what that means is I like to get outside, ski, bike, hike, swim, paddleboard, all that stuff. And I've never met a dog I didn't like. So that kind of explains a little collage of photographs there. That's all the different ways to play outside in Alaska. And let's just take a look at the state of things, that is, the state of things in our world today. 1/3 of Americans now show signs of clinical anxiety or depression. That's from the Washington Post, May 26, 2020. U.S. life expectancy has declined for a 3rd year in a row, from Business Insider in November of 2019. And the average American consumes 5 times more information daily than we did 50 years ago. And we now look at screens as many as 12 hours per day, from Forbes in January of 2019. So here's what that means. All of that is common, but what's common is not normal. And the consequence is the tax that we're experiencing on our nervous system is unprecedented. And because of that, now more than ever, it's important to be able to regulate our nervous system and understand where we can protect ourselves in order to live the life that we want to live. So I encourage you to do the uncommon. How can you do that? Well, you can be a kick-ass professional, partner, and parent without getting stuck in anxiety, frustration, and overwhelm. You can have the energy, health, and vitality that you want and live a life that you love without having to quit your job or spend all day at the gym. And the fastest way to a life of happiness at home and at work is to break one habit that all professionals have. So those are the things I'm going to deliver to you in our talk this evening. The challenge is that most of us spend a significant portion of our day in a state of suffering. The statistic from the journal Science, and the authors of the article were Killingsworth and Gilbert, we spend about 47% of our day thinking about something other than what we're doing. In other words, we spend a large portion of our day absent. Quote, "A human mind is a wandering mind, and a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. The ability to think about what is not happening is a cognitive achievement that comes at an emotional cost." So these incredible brains that we have, this incredible frontal lobe that has given us the ability to plan into the future, ruminate about the past, is a tremendous organ or component of our brain, but it has arguably turned itself against us in the sense that we are now spending more time worrying about our life experience than actually living our life experience. So that brings us to the first of our 7 steps towards nervous system regulation and wholeness. The first step is understanding cognition. So when we talk about cognition, what I mean is our ability to focus, our means of perceiving, and our worldview. So most of us have been told from an early age to focus or to pay attention. But most of us have never actually been taught how to cultivate focus or how to pay attention. But the reality is, where attention goes, energy and information flows. So the ability to train our focus is arguably the number one skill of our modern era, especially considering there are so many distractions that are vying for our attention. One of the ways to cultivate focus is through the practice of meditation. Many people probably, maybe you're tired of hearing about meditation, or you feel like you've had it up to here with notions of mindfulness and meditation. But the reality is there is no better way to train focus than to practice meditation. And it doesn't have to be an hour of meditation a day. That would be quite painful for most people. Rather, you could begin with something as little as 1 minute a day or 5 minutes per day. I actually stumbled upon meditation because I was having some experience with high blood pressure. And so I bought this little home blood pressure cuff, that you put on your wrist. And I'd been using it for a while and never had bothered to read the directions. One day I read the directions and it said, hey, you're supposed to rest for 5 minutes before you actually take your blood pressure with this thing. So at that point, I was like, geez, if I have to sit for 5 minutes before measuring my blood pressure, I guess I could just go ahead and start meditating during that time as well. So that's how my journey into meditation began. I'd say it culminated with me completing a 10-day silent meditation retreat and now becoming a meditation teacher. I teach meditation here in Alaska, but it all began coincidentally by me tracking my blood pressure, which meditation also improved my blood pressure regulation. So I would encourage you, there are tons of free apps that you can use for meditation. You can do guided meditation. That I would say is the easiest way to begin. But meditation is arguably the most effective bang for your buck thing that you could do next to sleeping, because it improves literally everything in your life. It lifts all the boats of concern in your life. So meditation is, I can't recommend it highly enough. So there's focus, and you can cultivate that through meditation. There's also the doors of perception, with the key takeaway being you are not what you think. Most people spend their entire life having little to no separation between their thoughts and their identity, meaning whatever they are thinking, they also believe that they are. What we can discover, and one of the ways that we can do that is through meditation, is that our thoughts are only one component of our experience. They are not our identity. And arguably, the degree to which you identify with your thoughts is the degree to which you will suffer on a daily basis. Because generally speaking, the thoughts that we're thinking aren't particularly good. This is what I call our innate negativity bias. So evolution wired us very well to remember the things that bite, the plants that sting, that fire burns, the foods that give us a tummy ache. Nature wired us to remember those well. The downside is that our brain is like Velcro for negative experiences. So we overemphasize the negative and underemphasize the good. The consequence is a suffering state for many people all day, every day, or at least a lot of the day, every day. If you couple that with a news cycle that's now 24 hours, running 24 hours a day, and rarely any good news, there's a significant challenge that we're facing. I would argue that there is an epidemic of unhappiness that is driven by our innate cognitive wiring and the information to which we're exposed on a daily basis. And the only antidote to that is to take control of our cognition and establishing a distance between what we think and what we identify as is the first step in doing that. So we've got focus, we have you are not what you think, doors of perception. And then the third, which is tremendous, that I think most people don't really consider, is your worldview. Albert Einstein said, the most important decision we make is whether we believe we live in a friendly or hostile universe. And it doesn't really just boil down to, is the glass half full or the glass half empty? It really boils down to the lens through which we see everything that happens in our world and in our life. And if you have and it wouldn't be a stretch, right, to think that many people might have an innately negative worldview. If you have an innately negative worldview, my invitation to you would be to begin a gratitude practice that might help you shift that. Because studies have shown, including the very well researched and documented field of positive psychology, has shown that we can shift our experience of the world by cultivating a gratitude practice, and it pays dividends that are immeasurable in terms of happiness and well-being. So those are the three keys of cognition. All right, so step 2 is environmental signaling. So this is where we get into the nervous system regulation, because essentially every single input and every single environmental exposure you have on a daily basis must be integrated and regulated by your nervous system. So that includes everything from the quality of the air that you're breathing, right? Whether you're having to filter out pollutants or you're breathing clean air, to the water that you're drinking, the light to which you're being exposed, and the sound. So environmental signaling is kind of at the, especially related to air, water, light, sound, is at the base level, what I call the core um, basics of your environmental input. So every environmental input your body receives must be regulated by your nervous system. At the most basic level, this includes the air you breathe, the water you drink, the light exposure you receive, and the sounds of your environment. So what I'd like for you to think about is, where is your environment taxing your nervous system, and what can you do to lighten the load? So for a lot of people, they are exposed to lighting conditions at work that are either too dim for good human functioning, or actually too bright for good human functioning. There's been an epidemic of depression in nursing homes simply related to lack of adequate light exposure. Obviously, we know that people who are in nursing homes might have other reasons to experience some degree of mental decline as well. But what has been demonstrated is that simply exposing people in nursing homes to adequate sunlight produced a significant increase in their mood. So for many of us, we are working in offices that are simply too dim, or actually overstimulating, in the sense that they expose us to too much blue light all day long. Similarly, take into consideration the sounds that you're being exposed to in your environment. For example, many people are working in office spaces where, or simply even working from home, where they might be bombarded by a lot of audio interruption in the form of notifications on the computer, on the phone, etc. I remember the first week or two of the lockdown, I had not experienced so many notification interruptions as when I started working from home, and all these little pop-ups were all over my computer. I don't have those, didn't have those enabled at my office, but I had them enabled at home and needed to correct that. So we have your just basic level of environment: air, water, light, sound. But next, we have what I think is even more invasive now, which is the social environment that comes in the form of the company that you keep, family to whom you're exposed, the neighborhood in which you live, what's happening in society at large, and the biggest one of all, social media. It was really interesting pulling up some photos for this slide, because all of the images, like the stock images related to social media, seem to imply that people enjoy using social media. And when I looked for a stock image that was related to people experiencing some degree of overwhelm, all of them were related to paperwork, which I found really funny, because my experience now perhaps might be that I would love to just have a bunch of paperwork rather than being bombarded by a bunch of digital media. But the big key here is that, and I think that everyone is experiencing this now, related to current events, is that we did not evolve to consume as much information as we're currently consuming. And the consequence is that it takes a toll on our nervous system that we are not adapted to handling. And so the consequence, and this is why I'm encouraging you to do the uncommon, the consequence is that this nervous system bombardment from social media and the screens to which we're exposed is essentially a health hazard that we must regulate, or we're going to suffer the consequences for not doing so. And suffering the consequences means anxiety, overwhelm, and simply feeling bad. So our ability to innovate is outpacing our ability to regulate. In other words, we are getting more inputs than we can sort. And so what I advise my clients to do, and that they have done with success, is rein in their social media consumption and their news consumption. So maybe you want to take 5 minutes per day to consume the news, 1 minute per day. Just set some degree of kind of capacity or limit on it in a way that you can consume it in a healthy way. And this also requires having a conversation with yourself and maybe even your spouse about how much information do you actually need versus how much of it simply becomes infotainment, and a kind of sick form of infotainment in the sense that it's not serving you. So we have the social component of your nervous system regulation. And then what is my favorite part would be the natural component of nervous system simulation, meaning getting into an environment that we evolved to experience that makes sense to us. So that means spending time in nature, spending time barefoot outside. And this is a little bit tied to the slide before, is I would encourage you to reduce your exposure to non-native EMF sources, meaning reduce your exposure to Wi-Fi, reduce your exposure to Bluetooth. All of these technologies are taxes on your nervous system. And so you're not using your Wi-Fi at night, presumably. You're not using your Bluetooth at night. So you could turn those things off at night, or you could even turn them off when you have your phone on your body. You could even take it a step further if you want and simply keep your phone in airplane mode when it's on your body, unless you're expecting a call. I know for some of you who are parents or who get a lot of phone calls, that might be a little less practical than for others, but the degree to which you can reduce your exposure to non-native electromagnetic fields, the more reduction that you can experience, the better that your outcomes will be. So next up is nutrition. And the three main categories that I want you to look at related to nutrition are fasting versus fueling, food quality, and macros, micros, and neurotransmitters. So fasting or not eating is just as important as eating. And what I like even better is when you eat can actually offset what you eat. So that's not encouraging you to eat junk food, but what studies have shown through research on intermittent fasting is that if you wanted to eat, say, a junk food diet, or if you wanted to eat some junk food on occasion, the harm that we suffer from blood glucose spikes, for example, related to that junk food, the harm is mediated and reduced if you're actually intermittent fasting. So you can use fasting to both achieve improved cognitive performance, achieve increased longevity, and achieve increased more optimal body composition. I know for women, sometimes there is a little bit of some women have had some challenges, and men too, but more women may have had challenges with having a healthy relationship with food, especially during adolescence. So you can certainly talk with your healthcare provider about whether fasting is right for you. But we did evolve with fasting as part of the natural feast-famine cycle of hunter-gatherer societies. So we are well adapted to fasting if you are ready to introduce that as a tool for your wellness. And fueling is just as important as fasting. So when we think about fueling, we're really thinking about food as having a purpose versus food being food is certainly a form of entertainment. Food is also provides a form of social bonding, right? So those aren't to be ignored, but we really should think about food as fuel first and foremost, and those other things we can layer on top. So when we think about food as fuel, the three things I'd like for you to look at are related to food quality. So the first of those is damaged fats versus undamaged fats. So all fats are not created equal, and the fats that are the product of industrial seed oils actually harm your body, because when your body tries to make cell membranes from these fats, the cell membranes have a less elasticity and less integrity when they are created from these fats that are essentially man-made from seed oils that we would never consume in nature. So I would encourage you to consume fats that occur naturally, such as coconut oil, butter, ghee, lard, etc., and reduce your consumption of fats that occur unnaturally, like hydrogenated fats and seed oils. Next up on food quality is glyphosate, and the impact of glyphosate is so far-reaching that it's even contaminated the water table in places like California, where it has been sprayed on so many crops for so long. So even people who are buying organic produce can be at risk of glyphosate exposure depending on irrigation practices that are used. But I would encourage you, to the extent that you can afford it and that it's right for you, I would encourage you to consume organic produce to reduce your glyphosate consumption. Glyphosate essentially cracks open the tight junctions in your gut, creating those tight junctions normally create a sealed barrier that prevent things from entering your bloodstream that are harmful to you. And the break in those tight junctions in your gut actually allow things to enter your bloodstream that are harmful. So I would encourage you to consume a low glyphosate diet. And the last one is sugar, which I certainly have had my fair share of throughout my life, but now have direct experience with how little it does for me and how good I feel without sugar. So it certainly took a while to wean myself off sugar, but to the extent that you can reduce your added sugar consumption, you will directly improve and increase your health. It really is true that we are what we eat. And lastly, when it comes to nutrition, I'll invite you to look at macro and micronutrients. So in coaching clients for performance, what we have found is that using protein in the morning is extremely satiating and also good for dopamine production. In other words, it supports the gut's production of dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that's related to motivation and drive. So you can use protein in the morning for motivation, and you can use carbohydrates in the evening for relaxation. They actually promote relaxation because they promote the production of serotonin. So my experience in the past is when I used to eat carbohydrates in the morning, it would make me ravenously hungry very quickly, so hungry that I would eat my lunch for snack, at say 10 a.m. rather than making it to lunchtime. And so what I've found and clients have had great success with is using protein for breakfast, protein and fat in the morning for breakfast, with carbohydrates in the afternoon or evening, and adding as many colorful vegetables, greens, and herbs to your diet for their antioxidant and anti-stress benefits. So moving to step number 4, movement, no pun intended. So we didn't evolve to be the stationary creatures that we are today. You could actually kind of compare us to sloths in the workplace, because so many of us spend so many hours per day in a stationary position, maybe even out of the office. Maybe you're a truck driver and you're in the same position all day, or maybe you're in the office and you're in the same position all day. And you can essentially think of movement as an essential nutrient that we need on a daily basis. And so that comes in 3 forms. The first that I would prioritize is flexibility, because as we sit in the same position or as we stand in the same positions all day long, we are decreasing our flexibility. And then the consequence is it hurts to move into new positions. And so we are putting ourselves in a double bind, if you will, because we don't want to stretch or we don't want to make these moves that are now painful for us because we've been so sedentary. So I would encourage you to incorporate movement into your day, and it doesn't have to be jumping jacks. It could be just simple squats, simple stretches that literally take nearly no time to do. So they would take no time away from the office or your workspace, but maintain a degree of humanity and human movement that most people are lacking. So movement is a nutrient. And it's important because it keeps your brain connected to your body and your body connected to your brain. So there are neural pathways of movement that we simply lose if we don't practice them, right? So it's just like if you learn a language as a teenager and don't practice, then you get rusty and lose that facility or instrument or whatever skill. So we could really think of flexibility and movement as a skill that needs to be maintained versus something that you do once in a while. So next is strength training, which I would say is some of the cheapest anti-aging medicine that you can't buy, right? You can't buy it because you can't pay anyone to go lift weights for you. But you can do body weight training, you can do strength training, and the benefits are tremendous, especially if you are over the age of 30 or 35, when sarcopenia begins to set in, right? So we know that we begin to lose muscle as we age, and it's not even, it's not like it starts when you're 60. It starts when you're in your mid-30s. And so none of us want to lose muscle, especially because muscle burns calories at rest. So maintaining body muscle actually helps us maintain a healthy metabolism, and it helps you look good naked. Lastly, we have conditioning. So aerobic exercise provides benefits everywhere from heart health to brain health. And it doesn't have to be you running a marathon or a 5K or whatever. It literally could be you walking after dinner, walking after lunch, or taking the stairs when you're at the office. So if we're trying to get more movement into our day, you might even be able to add a degree of aerobic conditioning without even having to, quote, do exercise, right? Like simply taking the stairs is going to provide you with a degree of aerobic conditioning that is easy, low effort, and that you wouldn't get otherwise, right? If you're taking the elevator, for example. And no one wants to be the person who gets winded taking the stairs. So I would encourage you to go ahead and start taking the stairs to improve that conditioning right now. So this is my favorite part of this presentation, because this is kind of like the core teaching that I've been sharing with clients and students, and that is regulation. So integrative experiencing. We've been talking about nervous system inputs and how our nervous system has to essentially integrate all of the things that we're being exposed to, from temperature regulation to air quality, water quality, food, etc. But what we're ultimately headed towards is a synthesis of mind and body. So that's where we're headed with integrative experiencing. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. Kind of the big picture is living your life as a meditation. So we live in this, some people would call it a psycho-cybernetic loop. What I would just say is a cycle of thinking that most of us are caught up in every single day for our entire life, and really might not ever get off the hamster wheel, so to speak. And that is, we have thoughts that drive our beliefs. Those beliefs affect how we feel, and how we feel determines the actions that we take, and consequently the results that we get. And then those results create a feedback loop. Now, it's debatable, what comes first. Does the belief come first? Does the thought come first? Does the emotion come first? I think it varies with each circumstance. So for example, there are some things that we probably experience in our life that, for example, let's say that you have a traumatic experience with a dog as a child, right? You get bitten by a dog, or just simply startled by a dog. And so you have an emotional experience, right? Which is the experience of fear. And then you may have a thought about that experience, which is dogs are dangerous, or that dog is dangerous. And then that might lead into a belief, which is all dogs are dangerous, right? So it doesn't matter whether the thought comes first, or the belief comes first, or the emotion. These are relatively interchangeable. The reason why they matter, however, is they do feed off one another. And the most significant portion is they affect the actions that we take, right? So if we had this traumatic experience with a dog as a child, we consequently begin to think that that dog was dangerous. Now we believe that all dogs are dangerous. And the actions that we then take is that we avoid dogs, even the most friendly and kind of harmless dogs. We avoid them and actually have an inordinate fear of them. And the consequence is, right, we reinforce that belief. So we avoid dogs because we have concluded that they're dangerous. And so the results that we get is we never allow ourselves the opportunity to discover that not all dogs are dangerous, right? So that the dog example is just one of many. And all of these, or many of these biases, these thoughts, and these beliefs are formed when we are children, before the age of 7, and before our brain is fully developed. And so we have a lot of core conditioning that doesn't even map on to reality logically, but we have copied and pasted it throughout our entire life. So I call this the thought bear, the T bear, right? So beliefs, emotions, actions, results, that's the bear. So the thought, the T bear. And this is not a cuddly, friendly bear. This is a bear of a problem. The problem is that these loops of believing, feeling, acting, results, thinking, etc., these loops keep us trapped in ruts that are very difficult to break out of. But there is hope. Pull up the next slide here. Okay. So the way out of this loop, we know that if you're on a circle, that the way off of the circle is a tangent. And so the tangent that takes us off this loop of negative thinking is to integrate that experience. And what does that mean? That means, as you heard me mention earlier in the presentation, you are not what you think, right? So most of us are mistakenly identifying with the thoughts, the beliefs, and the emotions that we have in this loop up here. And the way out of that loop is the tangent of integrative experiencing. What that means is that we are actually making peace with our reality. So most of the time when we have experienced a traumatic event, negative experience, embarrassing experience, any of these things that keep us limited and playing small in our life, when that experience comes up, we naturally seek to suppress it, right? Because it's uncomfortable. By nature, if it's embarrassing, if it's painful, if it's traumatic, no one is seeking to dive into that experience. So if you think about those experiences as beach balls that we're trying to hold underwater, which occasionally surface in our life, well, a lot of people are spending all of their mental energy trying to keep these beach balls of experience under water and under wraps. And consequently, they continue to hold power over you, right? Because you're trying to suppress them. So integrative experiencing is when the beach ball of shame arises, or the beach ball of fear of dogs, or the beach ball of embarrassment, we actually, rather than stuffing it down, we turn toward that beach ball of experience. So we are acknowledging the experience that we have. So that's step one. Step two is, once we acknowledge the experience that we have, as simply information, then we have an opportunity to change the narrative about this thing. So that's where we make a new decision. So before, we had these thoughts and beliefs that were driving our emotions, and that was affecting the action that we took that produced our results, and the system repeats itself. Here, we make a new decision, and the new decision leads to growth out of that old place, out of that old narrow paradigm of I'm not good enough, or dogs are dangerous, or insert your own issue here. So we make a new decision that provides us with growth, which gives us new beliefs, which make us feel better. So the cycle can repeat, but in a beneficial way. And notice where this cycle lives, right? This is not completely or solely in the head. Part of the integrative experience is that we are paying attention to the embodied component of these mental experiences. And that when we start paying attention and acknowledging those beach balls of experience that are welling up within us, we suddenly begin to notice, whoa, there is actually tightness in my chest, or constriction in my throat, or tightness in my legs. People hold these experiences in all kinds of places in the body. But when we begin to make peace with our own reality and make peace with our own experience, we're able to transform these experiences so that they no longer hold power over us the way that they did before. So we move from being the thought bear to a place of being. So a place of integrated experience. So the next step in this nervous system regulation is restoration. So the injuries and insults of life are inevitable. What's crucial is to do the repair. So restoration can come in what I characterize as three main forms. One of them is rest throughout the day. So simply incorporating periods that could be as simple as a 30-second pause, a 1-minute pause, just taking a moment out of the day to regulate your breathing, check in with what you are feeling in your body, what you're thinking in your mind, simply bringing awareness to what the heck you're doing. It naturally decreases your blood pressure, improves blood glucose regulation, and improves your ability to think and focus. So, you know, it's really ironic, some of the hard fought things that the labor movement earned in, you know, the late 1800s, early 1900s, all the way up through the 60s and 70s, you know, like a break for workers. I feel like so many of us don't take breaks today, and it doesn't have to be a 15-minute break, but you could simply take a 30-second break. You don't even need to get anybody's approval to take a 30-second break, but the benefits to your nervous system will be tremendous. So I encourage you to have periods of sporadic rest throughout the day, or regular, doesn't have to be sporadic, rest throughout the day. And then look at repair. So a lot of people ignore their injuries as if they are simply a part of life now. And just as we use it or lose it on flexibility, if we leave injuries to their own devices, they are apt to actually worsen and reduce the mobility, strength, and flexibility that we're seeking. So what's breaking down for you right now, right? are you having pain in your back? Are you having pain in your feet? Are you, you know, is your vision getting worse? Like, what is going on for you that you might be chalking up to a normal part of aging that's not actually a normal part of aging, right? Like, you have the opportunity to repair yourself. Your body has an innate ability to repair. And so I would encourage you to ask yourself, where am I failing to repair, thinking that this is now normal, that I can actually recover strength, mobility, flexibility, or simply be pain-free. And then the third one is the one that we're all kind of, or many people are chronically lacking in, and that is sleep, uh, which I would argue fixes everything if you can get enough of it. And it doesn't always boil down to quantity. Quality is also a component of it. And I had a discovery recently that has been game changing for me, which is I discovered how much sleep I was robbing myself of by eating too close to bed. And when I say eating too close to bed, I mean I have lived my entire adult life eating dinner an hour and a half before bed, maybe eating within 1 hour of bedtime, eating late. I used to work in bars and restaurants and close those down at like 2 a.m. So I would be eating, you know, when I got home in the middle, arguably in the middle of the night. So what I've discovered is that when I eat, when I eat um, too close to bed, obviously my body has to digest that food. And when it is digesting that food, it actually cannot rest and repair. So what I found to be the sweet spot is 3 hours before bedtime. My sleep is dramatically improved when I stop eating 3 hours before bedtime. If you're not tracking your sleep, I would encourage you to do that. There are tons of apps for every single phone that you can use to do this. There are devices like this ring, the Aura ring. There is the Bio strap. There is, I think there's a strap called like Whoop. So there are tons of wearables now that you can use to track your sleep. But I would encourage you, as we know, what gets measured gets improved. And so if you don't have any insight other than how you feel in the morning as to what's going on in your sleep, that I would invite you to start tracking your sleep, because it will be a game changer for you. Because the other thing you can do is use that information to prevent overtraining, right? So if you are doing hardcore strength work, hardcore cardio work, etc., or you know, you're trying to decide, hey, am I going to make it a big day hiking or whatever opportunity you have? Well, if you're not well recovered, you might end up putting yourself behind the eight ball. Furthermore, by tracking sleep, I've been able to identify when a cold, when sickness is oncoming, and head it off. And that's because the sleep tracker that I use, this ring, also tracks body temperature. And so I can see a nightly trend of increasing body temperature, and I know that that means I'm headed towards a cold. And so then I can supplement with zinc, get extra sleep, do all the immune supporting things that I do. So I would encourage you to, if you're not tracking sleep, that is one of the biggest game changers that I think you could start doing. And the last, but not least, component here that I think often goes unrecognized in our modern era, and I feel like a lot of people don't have, they're not comfortable saying the word spirituality. And I know that I wasn't for a while, but it is so key that I've gotten over any resistance about talking about it, and think it's arguably right up there with worldview on how key it is to your wellness and nervous system regulation. Here's what I mean by that. The Enlightenment was arguably one of the worst things that happened to us in terms of spirituality, because it reduced what we believe is reality to clockwork, right? To this mechanistic experience that we think everything is measurable, which is ironic for me talking to you about measuring sleep, and now I'm talking about how there are things that are not measurable. But the point would be that the human experience is not reducible to the scientific method. You and your existence are a miracle that goes unrecognized in, I feel like, in our modern culture for many people. And so there are a lot of ways that you can access spirituality, and I'll let you define spirituality for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but what I would encourage you to do is explore ways to connect with something greater than yourself. Because if you're living in a world where you're exposed to human-made stuff all day long, every day, I would say that is a recipe for nervous system dysregulation and a high degree of suffering and unhappiness. And so there are many ways that you can access the realm of spirituality and experiences that are greater than yourself. I'm a big fan of breath work. I've done holotropic breath work, which I would strongly encourage you to do if you're so inclined. I'm a fan of entheogens. Follow your local laws so that you don't run afoul of anything that you're not supposed to do. I am a fan of meditation. I'm a fan of nature. I grew up in a religious household, don't have strong religious affiliations, but certainly respect the value that it provides many people. And I seek to experience wonder everywhere I can, every day of my life. And so I like to think of this as we find the sublime where we lose ourself, right? So when we are tied up in ego, and that is the essence of the man-made world, then we are in oftentimes in a place of suffering. And when we get out of the ego, when we get out of the human-made world, that's where maximum beauty and divinity, I believe, is encountered. So I want to say thank you. And I don't know if anyone has told you this today, but I love you and I appreciate you being here. It is tremendous to be able to come together with people who have a common purpose that is for good in this world, especially in trying times. I think it's always important to be able to come together in this way. So thank you for your attention, and there's my contact information, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.